Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from my last days of my spring break in the U.S. Yes, I'll be headed back overseas very soon, enjoying the last days of a little bit of spring. It's been a strange spring, if I can say so myself. But I'm just saying so myself because 80 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, the world is doing some things. So we're just going to let it do what it's doing and try to find light, like the light that my guest has to share. And this is going to be a great conversation. Some background on how we actually came into contact. I met his colleague and collaborator, John Vanden Heuvel, at the Charter City Summit, New City Summit in Nairobi last year. And we had a great conversation. And just, as we connected on LinkedIn, I saw that my guest is now a part of the organization. And so that was very exciting to me. And I thought, hey, let's get on the podcast and talk about it. So let me get to his bio and we can take it from there. He is a former U.S. Navy SEAL and entrepreneur. He serves as chairman and co-founder of Small Farm Cities Africa Resilience Fund, a for-profit developing sustainable agriculture communities to combat poverty and human trafficking. He is actively scaling this model across Africa, including projects in Malawi, Zambia, and other regions. I think Kenya is one of them. Focusing on economic empowerment through infrastructure and land ownership for local farmers. Here in the U.S., following a successful career as a Navy SEAL, in 2016, he found himself pursuing careers in writing, speaking, and acting, including the 2017 franchise film Transformers: The Last Night, SEAL Team CBS, and the 2022 Universal thriller Ambulance. He served as a consultant on Netflix's Six Underground and Apple Plus TV series Invasion. As an educator, he co-founded Muskegon, Michigan's OPS Academy, which opened to inner-city students K to 8th grade in the fall of 2022. His story is captured in his HarperCollins bestselling autobiography, Transformed, a Navy SEAL's unlikely journey from the throne of Africa to the streets of the Bronx to defying all odds. Remi, Adeleke, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and blessing to be here.
Yes, indeed. So let's get started. Let's jump right in. Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
Yeah, so where am I from? I was born in Nigeria. I lived in Victoria Island and Lagos. I am currently in San Diego, California is where I live. And I think the third question was, what's my craft? I would say I try to be a jack of all trades and diversify my revenue streams, my businesses, and my goals, so that way I could reach success, whether it be through one or two or all of the goals. So as you mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur. I own a couple of businesses. I work in the film and TV business. I'm a filmmaker, storyteller, and then I'm also into the critical mineral space. And I'm a big advocate for anti-trafficking initiatives, and that takes up a good chunk of my time. So, and that pretty much also touches a lot of my companies that I own and a lot of different ventures that I have.
I definitely get that sense as I, just did my research and looking at the different things that you're involved in, that you're multi-talented and there's an integration. You kind of create this holistic sense of all of the things that you do, which is great. So let's dive a bit more in on where you're from. So Nigeria, Victoria Island. Tell us more about that from and how your family came to be in the U.S.
Yeah, so my father was born in Nigeria. After his father passed away, my grandmother moved him down to the southern part of Nigeria, specifically Lagos. He went on to get a scholarship to study architecture engineering in London. And after he had a lot of success, not just with education, but also in the businesses that he started in London and in America, he decided to go back to Nigeria and create what's now known as Banana Island, but it was known at the time as Lagoon City. Yeah. And so he was the architect of it. He came up with the ideas. He hired the Dutch engineers to dredge the foreshore in order to develop what is now known as Banana Island. And during that time is when I was born. So my mother, she's American. She actually grew up in New York City, in Harlem. And her and my dad met in 19 1980, I believe. They met at the Metropolitan Museum. And from what I understand, there was the Met Gala a couple of days ago. So they met there. I tell people all the time that my mother's story and my dad's story is the real coming to America story, because my dad wasn't cheap in the Eurotron. He was a very successful businessman, and my
Yeah.
mother was a straight up New Yorker with attitude. And so they met and got married. And then my mother moved to Nigeria with my dad. And that's when my brother, I have a brother who's a year older than me. He was born, and then I was born. And that's kind of where the first 5 years of my life took place. And unfortunately, there's a lot more to the story, but I know we don't have a lot of time. And so in short, the Nigerian government essentially stripped what is now known as Banana Island from my dad, Lagoon City. He went to court to go fight them. And in the midst of that, he was essentially killed, poisoned. And when he was no longer there to fight the case, then they fully acquired it, the Lagos state government. And in that time, he had invested so many of his resources, his assets. He had leveraged everything to not just develop the land, but also for the construction of buildings and on Lagoon City and the contractors and so on and so forth. And so he had leveraged all of his assets. So everything was wrapped up in the manufacturing of the island. And so much so that my mother would often tell my dad, hey, I don't trust the system here. I really would like you to put, a couple of million in a bank account in the US. So if something happens, we at least have something to fall back on. But he was just so focused on his vision and his mission, which was he wanted to create a Nigerian Wall Street, a place where people from all over the world could come and do business in Africa. And he wanted Lagoon City to be that hub. It was never meant to be a residential, luxurious island where people come and live and build properties. It was meant to be a center of commerce. And so, my dad was wholly focused on that, and he didn't listen to my mom, and her prediction came true. And so when he passed away, we went from very, very rich, having cars and nannies and traveling the world and having a driver and, living on a compound and on Victoria Island, to penniless, like literally having nothing. And so my mother being American, she wasn't going to raise my brother and I there. So she brought us to the States. And that's kind of how we ended up in New York City.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I know Banana Island, I know Victoria Island. So folks, the show notes are going to be very rich because I'm going to provide plenty of links to kind of the story behind the story so that we get a full sense of what Remi's story is. So you find yourself in New York and you're growing up in New York. And how did you determine that the Marines was what you wanted to do next? As you had a father who was an entrepreneur, a businessman. And so how did the Navy become part of your story?
The Marines eventually became a part of my story, but we'll get to that. So I got in a lot of trouble in my teen years, or even before my teens, hustling, just being a product of my environment. And I want to say 1995, a movie by the name of Bad Boys came out. And that was the first movie where I saw two, African Americans who looked like me, but they still had, and they were heroes, but they still had a sense of who they were. They looked and acted like me, but they were still heroes. And so that really kind of showed me a different perspective. It showed me that as a young African American growing up in the Bronx, I didn't have to be a drug dealer. I didn't have to play sports. I didn't have to just do the things that I was doing. I could be a hero of some sort. And so that's when the first seed was planted. And then a year later, I saw a movie called The Rock. And that was my first exposure to Navy SEALs. And that's when I was like, wow, now I know the kind of hero I would want to be. So I went from, hey, I could be a hero to, hey, if I ever turn my life around, I think I know the kind of hero I'd like to be. I'd like to be a Navy SEAL. But again, that was a very, very far-fetched idea because I was in 96. In 96, I had started my freshman year of high school. And then fast forward, selling drugs, running all kinds of crazy legal white-collar crimes, graduated high school, but I was out there hustling hard. And then I had ended up getting involved in a dealer with a drug dealer that went bad. I sold him some products that were supposed to last for a certain amount of time, only lasted for a fraction of that time. And my life was threatened, and my mother's life was threatened indirectly. And so that was a huge wake up call to me. And so I remember in June of 2002 is when I decided, oh, what else am I going to do with my life? Like my life, I'm 19, about to turn 20 in August. All the hustling that I've done has amounted to nothing. I've lost absolutely everything. Like, what else is there left for me to do? And that's when I was reminded of, the type of hero I said I would want to be years earlier. And so first I went to the Marine Corps recruiter's office. So you were pretty right. I walked into that office first and I saw a cutout of a Marine that looked like a SEAL. He had like an M4 with a suppressor on it. He had, a wetsuit on and dive tubes and just everything. And I was just like, wow, like that's the Navy SEAL that I saw in the movie. That's what I want to be, because I didn't know the difference, right? I didn't know as much of the difference. And so and the Marines, a lot of people don't know this, but the Marines are actually a department of the Navy. So the Marines actually fall under the Navy.
Yes.
And so, long story short, I was in the office for like 15 minutes. There was coffee on the desk, but recruiter never showed up, which turned out to be an absolute blessing. So I went 2 doors down to the Navy recruiter's office, walked aside. She was there, beautiful Puerto Rican girl. So in my stupid mind, I'm thinking, not only am I going to be in the Navy, but I'm going to be a new girlfriend. And she saw right through me. And I was engaged. She saw a lot of fools like me every day. And she was from the Bronx. She was from the Bronx. She had just actually, decided after she did her sea duty tours to come back to the Bronx to work as a recruiter, because she grew up in the Bronx. And she had me do a practice ASVAB test, which I passed. And then she had me, and she ran my background. And she discovered that I had 2 warrants out for my arrest. I had a warrant in New Jersey and a warrant in New York. And I bolted for the door. She stopped me. And I said, where you going? I said, I'm getting out of here. She was like, there's nothing out there for you. I said, yeah, no crap. There's nothing in here for me either. And she asked if I had a nice suit. And I said, no. She said, asked if I had a nice collared shirt and some nice pants. I said, I'm sure I could find something. Why? And she said, come back tomorrow. I said, for what? And she said, just shut up. Come back tomorrow. So I came back the next day and she was in her dress uniform and she took me to both judges, the judge in New Jersey, judge in New York, advocate on my behalf, told me, hey, listen, this kid's made mistakes, but he has potential. He's trying to join the Navy after an act of war. 9/11 had just taken place 9 months earlier. And
Right.
yeah. And so she was like, he can't join the Navy warrants in a record. And so both judges, because of her advocating, both judges said, hey, all right, we'll expunge his record, clear his warrants. That's how I was able to join the Navy. And then she went a step further, fudged the paperwork to stick me into the Navy. And I say it's a blessing because that the Marine Corps recruiter wasn't in there, because I get contacted from young people all across the country all the time who know my story. And they're just like, hey, no recruiter won't touch me. Like, a recruiter tried to get me in, nothing worked. I had a recruiter try to write a letter to Congress, nothing worked. And I just say, hey, it's all about finding that right recruiter that's smart, that knows system, and is not going to it's going to do the work to get your record cleared first. And then it's going to, fudge the paperwork to sneak you in. Like, there's nothing I can do, and so it's tough. But if that Marine Corps recruiter was there, who knows where I would be. And I'd say it's a blessing for a second reason, because she died 2 years later and of an autoimmune disease, Tiana, and my recruiter. And when I met with her family years later, they told me that her brother specifically told me that when he got a misdemeanor, she was not a recruiter yet. But she was on sea duty. She flew back to New York and did what she did to help him get into the Air Force. And then, she would drive around the Bronx and look for young people on the street, on the corner, hustling, selling drugs, doing whatever, and try to get them out of it to join the military to get a second chance at life. So I say it was a blessing because I ran into the one recruiter who happened to be in the office by herself alone to do what she did for me. And then, she passed away 2 years later. So yeah, that's how I ended up in the Navy.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. And so life-changing, obviously. And so you did how many years were you in the Navy?
A total of 13 and a half.
Okay. And so you have the successful career in the Navy, and then you decide what's next. So I'm going to ask you why the where. How did you now come to be living, working, playing where you currently are located?
I ended up here because I got out. My last duty station was here on a SEAL team in San Diego, in Coronado. And so when I got out, my wife, she's a doctor, and her practice is like right down the street from where we live. And she's from Tacoma, Washington. I didn't want to move to Tacoma, Washington. I didn't want to move back to New York. I hate cold weather. And so that's kind of how we decided to stay here in San Diego. And then, a lot of my network was here in San Diego. And, I was actually in grad school when I got out. I was getting my master's in business. And so it just worked out for me to be here. And then I want to say about 4 months after, or 5 months after I got out, is when I got contacted to work on my first film, Transformers, and they were filming in LA. And I just happened to be in San Diego. So it all worked out because they were starting filming in LA. And so LA only like a 3.5 hour drive for me. I don't have to jump on a plane. They need me to be up there the next day to work on the film as a consultant and on camera. And it made sense for us to stay here. And then, even after my career in the film and TV industry started to, go to the next level, it just made more sense for us to be here opposed to be like somewhere else. That's how we kind of ended here.
Yeah. So you're Hollywood adjacent, so to speak.
Yeah. I can't live up there. It's too crazy to live up there.
Right. A little less pressure, a lot more. Like San Diego's beautiful. I love it there. So it makes a lot of sense. So tell us more about the business of being in film. So you started as a consultant, not necessarily on screen, but consulting. Okay. So tell us how that came about.
Yeah. So I started out as a consultant, but also on screen. So Michael Bay, he likes to, as a matter of fact, another God thing. The first movie I worked on was from the same director whose first 2 films inspired me to be a SEAL. So Michael Bay directed Bad Boys and he directed The Rock. And those were the 2 films that inspired me to be a SEAL. Fast forward in my office writing papers for grad school, I get a phone call from this woman who works for Michael Bay, doesn't know anything about me. She just knows I'm a Navy SEAL. And she's like, hey, Bay needs a Navy SEAL in LA tomorrow to work on a project. And he likes to use real SEAls, just like in that Rock movie, they were actual Navy SEAls that he used for that for one of the big action sequences. So I was up there as a consultant, but I was also on camera as a Navy SEAL. And so that's kind of how I kind of got my start in the business. And that was just supposed to be one day, but one day turned into 3 weeks, and then 3 weeks turned into 6 months. So I went from filming in LA to filming a week in Arizona to filming 2 weeks in Michigan. Then after the second week in Michigan, I was asked to stay for like another 3 weeks. And then after we wrapped up in Michigan, I was asked to fly to London to film in London. And then after we filmed in London, then we came back and filmed the last sequence in San Diego, right? And so it was during that time that I really got to learn the business. And I got to learn about, at least I would say, the creative side of the business, like what producers do, what directors do. And I saw how much control and power that these producers and these executives and these filmmakers had. And everybody else, regardless, no matter how big of an actor you are, everybody else are just essentially like, just small pieces to the puzzle. But the money and the longevity is in being behind the camera opposed to being in front of the camera. And so that's when I was like, I love storytelling. I've always been a writer. My mother would make my brother and I write when we were really, really young. In order that we had to read books and New York Times articles and write reports. And if the reports weren't near perfect, she would make us pick another book or another article and start over. We couldn't go outside and play with our friends in the summer until that was done. And so I hated it at the time, but writing it revolves around everything that I do. It's just now, a screenwriter and the WGA Writers Guild of America. I've published 2 books. I've written 2 more. And it all starts in film and TV. It all starts with a script. It all starts with the written word. You can't make a movie or a TV show without a script, without a blueprint, right? So I learned that, being a writer really opens doors for you to be a producer, and it opens doors for you to be a director. And that's kind of how I've grown from where I'm at today. And I've been able to, as you mentioned in the introduction, I've been able to work on some really big projects, which has led to relationships that I've been able to build. But it's also giving me a lot of experience and really giving me a guidepost as to where I want to be, like what the end game is, right? And so I started out as a consultant slash actor. Almost every project except for one, Invasion, because they wanted me to act in it, but I was like, I don't want to act. I just want to be a consultant. And so all of those projects, essentially my film school for me. And I also went from actor slash consultant to writer to now writer director. So now, me and my team, we are pushing this boulder uphill to make this organ trafficking film that I've written, that I'm going to be directing. We've got a lot of good pieces in play. We've raised about 5 million. We have another 3.5 million. We're close to securing, which will put us at 8.5 million. We had a big meeting a couple days ago with a major studio that might come aboard for distribution. And that's was my end goal years ago. And it's taken a long time to get to this point because it's a first time filmmaker, first time director in the business. Is really hard for financiers and for actors to trust you. And so it's just been a lot of having to prove myself and just not quit, not give up, just like I couldn't quit in SEAL training. And so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at today. And I'm looking forward to what the rest of this year has to hold for me as a filmmaker.
I love it. I love it. So tell us more about how you became attracted to the trafficking. I mean, everyone feels like, that's a terrible thing, but human trafficking, how did that become a core to, your mission of solving and eradicating that issue?
It started out when I got out in 2016. I started just getting contacted by random anti-trafficking nonprofits for different reasons. One was like, "Hey, could you come speak at this event? Because we're trying to, bring more awareness around trafficking." And like, I don't know anything about trafficking. "Oh, we just want you to share your story because your story is inspiring." All right. And then another, "Hey, we're doing this," another anti-trafficking nonprofit. "Hey, we're doing this fundraiser. Since you're Transformers, can you come participate in this bowling fundraiser?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Right. So nonprofits would reach out to me for various reasons. And then I finally got contacted by a nonprofit that would employ former special operations guys like myself to go overseas and to rescue kids trapped in sex trafficking rings, but also bring to justice Americans who pay for sex with kids in said countries. And that was so obviously I was able to go down overseas with them and work with them. And it was even more of an eye opener. And then fast forward to, I want to say 2018 is when I was like, man, there's just such a huge problem. It's a global problem, requires a global response. It feels like you go out and save 100 kids. I'm just throwing out a random number, not saying that that's the number we save. There's going to always be 100,000 more that need saving. And so because it's such a global problem, we have to engage more people. What's the best way to engage more people? And for me as a filmmaker, I was like, with the use of filmmaking and storytelling, because people won't read a book, people won't read articles about it, but people may be inclined, especially if you can make the film entertaining enough, people will be inclined to watch a film, get entertained, get educated, and then hopefully get engaged enough to say, I want to do something, right? And so I wanted to use it as a recruitment tool, just like film was a great recruitment tool for me to join the Navy and be a SEAL. I wanted to tell stories that would be a recruitment tool to get more people engaged in this fight. And so I decided, because I knew that there were just so many stories around sex trafficking, from Taken to, the list goes on and on and on, that I really wanted to, change my focus and talk about a form of human trafficking, which another thing, when people hear the term human trafficking, they think that means sex trafficking. It doesn't. Human trafficking is a blanket term, which it's an umbrella term. And under human trafficking, you have these different genres. You have sex trafficking, forced labor, forced marriage. You have organ trafficking, and the list goes on and on and on, different forms of trafficking. And so I wanted to focus on the organ trafficking side of human trafficking, because there was nobody talking about it. And I think in part because people didn't know how to talk about it. So I ended up going and investing, pulling, about $120,000 out of my own pocket. And I funded a short film called The Unexpected. It's on YouTube now. People can go check it out. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. It's a 32-minute short film. And just to be clear, there's two films called The Unexpected. One is an actual documentary that the Navy did on me. The other one is it's a narrative short film. And so the narrative short film is The Unexpected. So if people want to check it out, just type in The Unexpected Bronze Lens, because that was a festival that it was in. So that differentiate from the other Unexpected. Just wanted to throw that out there. Or you type in the Unexpected Bronze Lens and then Remi, it'll pop up. But that film is inspired by true events around the international organ trafficking ring and how trafficking rings move organs from one part of the world to another part of the world in a way where the organ is still viable when it reaches its recipient. So I made that film, and then about 2 years later or a year later, I released the film. And when I released the film, that's when it really got a lot of buzz, man. A lot of people were just like blown away by it and educated, which was the point of it. And then fast forward a couple months later, my publicist said, Remi, you need to write this as a feature film. Like, there's appetite for this. You need to make this film. And I was like, I don't want to write the script on spec, which is speculation, which means you write the script, you don't get paid. There's no guarantee that you're going to get paid unless the script sells. I kind of like put it off. And then finally, after a while, I was just like, all right, what's the main reason why I wanted to tell a story? To educate people. With a feature film, I'll be able to educate and engage even more people, than a short film. And so that's when I just started doing what I do. So in short, I know the answer was, how did you get into the trafficking? So I think I fulfilled that answer early on, but that was the beginning. This is the end result.
It's so fascinating. And I like that you broke down the different segments of the space of trafficking, because I think people, often just think sex trafficking, obviously, because of what's going on now in the news, but even more deeply, how the ruptures are global, and it's a true operation, it's economic impact. And so I think that also led you back to Africa in a large degree. So how did small farm cities find you? So how did you decide, okay, I'm ready to go and do something back? Because I can imagine the impact of how you grew up and how you had to leave left a mark on you. And so to be able to, and willing to think about, how do I do business? Because this is a for-profit enterprise that you're in. How did that come about? How did you decide that it was time?
Well, John, he had reached out to me, many, many years ago. I want to say like 2017. I want to say we met through
early.
Yeah, we met through a mutual friend, a woman by the name of Emily Weirda. And Emily and I did a trip to Israel in 2016. And so, given my background in Nigeria, she was like, hey, you should probably connect with Remi Adeleke, like, he's from Nigeria, he's a SEAL, he has an inspiring story. And then that's kind of how me and John met. And then John invited me out to DC in 2017, and we met in person. And then we went to meetings with some congressmen, because he was telling me about small farm cities hadn't even been launched at this point. It was just more of an idea. And he wanted to do it in Somalia, because there was a big refugee crisis in Somalia. So it's like, all right, cool. But, I had so many things going on at the time. That was like the beginning of my film and TV career. And it was just like nonstop busy. So I couldn't really commit in any way. And then for a few years, John would reach out to me every couple months and say, hey, just check it in, man. Here's what we're doing. We're expanding. I think he did something in Ghana for a little bit. Yeah, that's how you guys met, right?
Well, no, we met in Nairobi at the conference, but in speaking with him, he told me about, first of all, Colorado. That's part of his story as well. Mm-hmm. And then Ghana. And that was just a great connection to have, and an understanding of how this concept of small communities is a way forward, particularly in the agricultural sector in Africa.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So finally, I was in Gaza last year doing some work with the agency. We helping, I was asked, because they were looking for special operations guys with my background, and going to Gaza and kind of help participate in the hostage exchange and all of that stuff. And for other reasons I can't go into detail about, but when I was out there, John reached out to me. He's like, man, here's where we are. Here's what we have been able to do in Malawi. Like, I really want you to come on board. I want to do this resilient cities, and this resilient cities fun, and I really want you to participate. And so I was like, hey, let's talk when I get back. And so we talked when I got back. Kind of sold me is, this is the time. This is the time. And I was like, all right. So I flew out to Malawi and checked out what he had going on. And then I was like, all right, I think I could carve out time to work, to work with you guys here and bring my expertise to the table. And that's kind of how it all happened. So it wasn't that I wasn't interested. It was more so like, I'm an all in type of person. Like I just acquired a stake in an AI company called Civil Watch Technologies, and we're doing awesome work around, protecting the civil rights of people when they're driving or when they're, just going down the street. And I can go into detail about it a little bit later if you want to hear about it. I'm the type of person that when I told the Civil Watch team, I was like, hey, listen, like, I'm an all-in person. You know what I mean? Like, I don't half step, I don't halfway anything. So if you want me to be a part of this, I need everybody to be of the same mindset, right? And so that's why I couldn't really, work with small farm cities, not because I wasn't interested, it's because I knew that I wasn't able to give it the time that it needed. And finally, I felt like, okay, I can give it the time. I feel like I can give it the time.
Nice. So really quickly for our listeners, tell us what the concept is for the small farm cities and the Resilience Fund.
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. Essentially, what we're doing is we are buying land in African countries specifically, but we're acquiring land in areas where there are no economic pathways. And in Malawi has a really huge human trafficking issue. I mean, human trafficking is so widespread, it's almost a way of life out there, right? And so, for example, just take Malawi for an example, right? So we bought massive plots of land in Malawi, small cities to have farms on it. So small farm city, but small city has farms. And we hire these young people. I'm 43 now, so I could call them young, but they're in their late teens, early 20s. And we hire them to farm the land. We don't just hire them, but we educate them as well. And then we teach them how to do engineering. A lot of them are very brilliant, and they've built Airbnbs on one of our small farm cities, and they built a restaurant on one of our small farm cities, and they built houses on our small farm cities, right? And so we're creating these economic pathways. So now all of the farming that's been done, those were fruits, vegetables, it gets sold. And now it gets sold to the local economy. And now, again, we're creating these economic pathways. Our employees will go consult with other farms because of the training we provide for them. So they'll get paid as consultants. They'll leave small farm city, not permanently, but for like a day or two or a week, and go consult with other farms to teach them how to yield better crops, right? There's a titanium mine next to one of our small farm cities in Malawi. And when they were trying to figure out their security situation, wiring security cameras and setting perimeters and all of that, our security guy, young guy, went and consulted for them and got paid to consult, right? There's a restaurant in our small farm city where the people who work at the titanium mine come and pay for food. There's Airbnbs on the small farm cities where some of the workers will come rent an Airbnb while they're working in the mines, right? And so we're taking the land where there is no real economic opportunities, and we're creating economic opportunities there to the point where the majority of our employees own homes on our small farm cities, which is unheard of in Malawi for young people to own an actual home, right? And so that's what we're doing. We are creating economic pathways. It's not about just, you hear the saying, it's better to, teach a person to fish than give them the fish. We're going beyond just teaching them to fish. We're teaching them how to sell the fish, right? So we're teaching them how to fish and teaching them how to sell the fish so that way they can be able to, thrive on their own.
And it's about community.
Yeah.
It sounds like this is, there's some people say village mentality, but the great thing about villages is that people work together and they see a common vision. Cities, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but in a village context, in a small city context, we're all on the same page. And so I love that as a tool for rethinking. So tell us, travel around the world, you've heard many languages, you might speak other languages. We want to know what you hear, and that's called Glocal speak. So do you have a word, a phrase, or a saying that's been a meaningful part of your local experience here, there, anywhere? And how did you come to value it as global speak?
Well, that's going well. I would say there's a saying that I've tried to live by, and I've coined this saying myself through so many life experiences. But it's simple. It's a failure is only a failure if you don't learn from it. But if you learn from it, it's a lesson. Again, having traveled all over the world, been to war, been to some of the most hostile environments on the face of the planet, as recent as last year being in Gaza and surrounded by Hamas and Fatah terrorists. That's such a universal saying, not just in war, but in business and life and family and everything. It's like we're going to face failures. Everybody's going to face failures. The greatest people who have ever lived have faced the most failures. But it's only a failure if we don't learn from it. There's so many lessons that we can take out of the failures and apply moving forward. And it's not just failures, it's setbacks, it's rejection. It's a part of it as well, too. I just put that under the umbrella of failure, right? And so, yeah, so that's something that's very universal to me. And no matter what country I'm in, no matter what business field I'm in, no matter what I'm doing, that saying holds value.
That sounds a lot like a mindset hack, but I do want to ask you, what is your mindset hack? How do you hack your mindset? How do you get in the zone?
How do I get in the zone? I don't want to be poor. That's how I get in the zone.
I get it. I get it. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's just natural for me to grind and grind and grind because I've been poor, and I have 4 children, and I don't want them to ever experience what I experienced. I want them to have a good life, and I want to set them up for success, and I want to create generational wealth so that my grandchildren, and my great grandchildren will be in a good spot. Like not to the point where they're just relying on that and not working and not learning the importance of grinding themselves, but so that they have a good, foundation to leap into this crazy world that we live in and be successful. And so that's my hack. My motivation is I don't want to fail. That's my deep rooted emotional reason why. And part of failure for me is, being in poverty. Not that people who are poor are failures, but that's for me. For me, that's my barometer. That's a failure. My kids not having what they need. So yeah, that's my hack. My kids are my motivation. And then the naysayers, the people who have written me off, especially people like, oh, you'll never be a filmmaker. You'll never direct a movie. People will not take you serious. That fuels me to prove them wrong.
Right. So speaking of this not failing, you're doing a lot. So you mentioned a lot of your entrepreneurial endeavors. You have a clothing line, you're in minerals. Tell us a little bit more about how you decide what businesses you're going to get into and some of the businesses that you also have going on.
Well, I think all of them have been organic, I would say. Like film, TV, that's a business. I mean, I just kind of fell into that and I enjoyed it and I enjoy storytelling. Critical minerals, that was something I was approached by. The guy who's Nigerian, he actually lived the first, I want to say 25, 30 years of his life in Nigeria, and then he became an American citizen. So he has dual citizenship and super smart businessman. He's done a lot in the mining space. And I was introduced to him because he wanted to, he invested in some mines in Nigeria and I believe in Ghana as well. And he's just been trying to break into the U.S. market because China's been his primary buyer, and Korea and Japan, and America's just not buying. In big part because America doesn't have the same refining capacity that China has. China has perfected, right? And so he reached out to me. He's like, hey, I know you're in the military and you have a lot of connections and you do work in Africa. Like, is there a way you could help me find buyers in the US? And me being, an American, and I understand that a lot of these critical minerals are important, not just to the technology, because they're in every cell phone, every electric battery, like even all kinds of, factories here in the US, when it comes to energy and when it comes to data centers requires these critical minerals. So it's going to be integral to the success of our nation, but also on the military side of things, a lot of our weaponry utilizes these critical minerals, right? And so as a person who's American, I was just like, hey, I'd love the opportunity to be able to find offtake here in the US, or, find investors that can help us develop some refineries in the US, so that way we could serve as a refinery. Right. And so that's kind of how that kind of came about. They're all different, the AI tech startup that I told you about, Silver Watch Technologies, that was just a guy who reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, I got a startup. It's an AI company. Like, I'd love for you to introduce us to some investors if you feel. And he pitched me and the company, and I looked at it and I was just like, wow, like, it's good. I have some ideas that could take it to the next level. You guys have to be open to that. And I'd love to come on board as a partner, acquire stake. So I invested in the company financially, and I truly believe in this AI technology. I think that it's going to revolutionize just law in the US. And a big part of the AI technology is prevention. And going back to what we're doing in small farm cities, a big part of it is preventing traffickers, right? So preventing trafficking. So now when these traffickers go to these villages to go take these teenage girls or boys, right? They're not there. They're on our small farm cities thriving economically, right? And so our AI technology is all about prevention. So like if a kid is driving down the street and our AI is he's driving into a school zone, our AI is going to alert him, hey, this is school zone, speed limit is 25 miles per hour. You're currently going 27 miles per hour. You can get a ticket. Here's what the ticket will be. And you'll get an infraction lose some points on your license or whatever. And then if that same kid gets pulled over for speeding, the AI will help calm the kid down and help the kid deal with their interaction. So essentially, if the cop says, hey, turn off your phone, your camera, the AI will say, no, that's against his First Amendment right. He's allowed to record this exchange. And if the cop says, well, why were you speeding? The AI will say, hey, well, I recommend that you don't answer that question because you will be admitting guilt, right? And it records the exchange, and it helps manage the exchange. So now there's a mediator right there, not just in the case that the kid gets pulled over, but just while the kid's driving, like it's like having a little angel. And then we have a version for Lyft drivers and Uber drivers where there's been a lot of issues here in the US with bad customers. And the Uber driver tells the customer, hey, get out the vehicle. You've crossed the line, whether it's being drunk or cursing or being belligerent, and the person hasn't gotten out. And in some cases, the driver has ended up getting shot, robbed, or killed, right? And so in our case, our AI will, it will utilize the phone camera as a dash cam, front and back, recording each drive. As soon as a customer gets in the car, it'll start recording. And if the customer does something that they're not supposed to do, that's against Uber or Lyft rules, then the AI will inform them and essentially act as the bad guy. And if it gets to the point where if the driver asks the person to get out of the vehicle and they don't, the AI will jump in and say, hey, you've been asked to get out of the vehicle. If you don't, it's going to be considered trespassing. And the AI can make the decision to either clandestinely dial 911 and also send a live footage to the authorities along with the location, or let the customer know, hey, I am calling 911 if you do not leave the vehicle right now, right? And so it's all about prevention and de-escalation. And so that's what our AI is doing. And then we have a version for police officers fresh out of the academy. There was a situation about a couple years ago where a police officer pulled over a guy for speeding, rightfully so. The guy was really irate. And when the police officer handed him his ticket, the guy ripped it up and threw it out the window. And the police officer did something he wasn't supposed to do. He said to the guy, if you don't get out of this vehicle and pick up this ticket, I'm going to give you another ticket. And the guy got out of the car and picked up the ticket. But this was on a busy highway. And that police officer ended up getting fired because he put a motorist in a position where they could have gotten killed, right? If a car drove by and on a highway and hit that person, like that would be a lawsuit. And now the police department would be getting sued, right? So in that situation, our AI would say, I recommend that you retract that order because that's unlawful. Just issue them another ticket and let them go on their way, right? And so it's not just our AI is all about prevention, and it's to, help police officers do their job correctly. It's not like a big government that has their eyes on Big Brother, that has their eyes on them, that's going to snitch. It's about, hey, prevention. So it's about, hey, I'm telling you what's going on and what you need to do because that's important. And the cool thing about our AI is the laws are not just for the country. Our laws are down to the actual county, not just this country, not just the state, but down to the county, right? because every county, every state has different traffic laws. And again, our AI is not just for if you get pulled over. It's like if you get stopped for shoplifting, like by a police officer and everything, right? So again, that's why, to answer your question, it's companies that I feel are going to make a difference, right? And whether it's in storytelling, whether it's in saving lives through our AI technology, whether it's through whatever, and a big part of it with our AI technologies, we're going to be able to collect tons of data that we'll be able to sell to the government, sell to law firms, sell to all of these people to help them do their job more effectively. And we could hopefully minimize lawsuits against states and counties for bad police practices. So I choose companies based off of, are they going to make a difference? Right. I'm a capitalist. So one, is this something that's viable, that's going to be financially successful? Right. And then two, is this something that's going to help change or save lives in some way? Even my apparel company, Kejo, our motto, Kejo means the eighth, it's Yoruba for the eighth. And our motto is, we believe that the eighth wonder of the world is when people rise up and become the inspiration, motivation, and education through wear. So the majority of our apparel, our shirts have sayings like, solutions are greater than excuses, and solutions greater than solutions, process greater than outcome, team equals ultimate weapon, nothing worth having ever came easy. And we have people buying our shirts from all over the world. We have customers all over the world, and we get comment, we hear feedback. Oh, I was walking down the street and somebody looked at my shirt and they were like, oh, I really needed to hear that today. Like, I really needed to see that. Where'd you
Oh,
get
wow.
that shirt? Right. And there's so many stories that we get like that, how our shirts have inspired people. We have an anti-trafficking shirt called Benevolent Savage. And on the back of it, it says, be a benevolent savage by helping to end child trafficking. And a portion of each shirt sale goes to an anti-trafficking nonprofit. And so essentially, what we're doing is we're making a difference through apparel. It's not just about, hey, buy my shirt, right? It's about, hey, buy my shirt so you can wear it, because it may be somebody walking down the street, or you may see at the airport, who sees that saying and they need it that day, and it inspires them and gives them hope. It's a reminder to them to not quit and keep going, right? We have another shirt called Unlimited Potential. On the front, it says Unlimited Potential. On the back, it's an X-ray and MRI of the brain. And all the words unlimited potential make up the brain matter, right? And what are we saying there? Within your brain, you have unlimited potential. The only limits you have are the limits you put on yourself. So all the businesses that I partake in, it's all about, is this going to make a difference? Is this going to move the needle and help somebody, even if it's just one person?
I love that. That's so awesome. So we've talked about what's new, what's now, and who you are as an entrepreneur, as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. Who is Remi when he's not on the clock? Is he a reader? Is he a writer? Is he a listener? Or what else do you do in your not so structured time? And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens?
Well, I coach my kids basketball. My two oldest sons, they play basketball. And so my favorite pastime is coaching them, coaching them and coaching the games, the practices, their team, helping their team get better. I get so much enjoyment out of that. And so that's a big thing for me. Obviously, fitness is a big part of my life. I wake up every morning, between 5 and 5:30 in the morning, depending on the morning. And I go and I work out. And whether it's cardiovascular, I spend a lot of my time, especially as I gotten older, focusing my time on my workouts on cardiovascular. And I get so much clarity. I think I get so many ideas when I work out, because I guess it's because the blood flow into the brain, especially when I'm writing, because writing screenplays can be challenging, because it's you have to use structure, and you have these characters, and you have to plot, and you got to make it all work together. And then you got to have everything pay off and set up and all of this stuff. And it could be like playing chess. So when I'm working out, even today, I was on the treadmill in the gym, and just all of these ideas for this new movie that I'm writing kind of started coming to me, and I was able to kind of figure out how to get a character out of a bad situation, right? And so fitness is a big thing. I don't listen to music when I work out. I stopped listening to music probably 10 years ago. When I work out, I listen to podcasts, I listen to filmmaking YouTube channels, I watch filmmaking YouTube channels. That's what I do. That's how I essentially, get my study in, while I'm working out. So yeah, I do that. And then I play Monopoly, which my wife is my wife hasn't been happy with lately. But if for some reason I have the Monopoly app on my phone, but I just find it very, because I'm playing against other people all around the world, and it's like it's 4 players, and blaming on property and strategy and having to do trades, and so it just always kind of gives
Yeah,
it, always
that's kind of neat.
yeah, you got to negotiate back and forth for a property, and you got to bid on properties, and then like it's like simulating business. Yes, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's been one of my favorite pastimes lately.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Wow. So that's a new tip. Monopoly, the app,
Yeah.
and filmmaking YouTube. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. I mean, this has been so wonderful. I'm so excited to have met you and to have this conversation. And I look forward to seeing your work, doing what I can to support what you're doing, specifically in Africa, but also here whenever I'm around. And so before we sign off for today, do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for what you do for the continent and getting the word out there. And I appreciate you and your platform.
Thank you. All right, Glocal citizens, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcast. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave us a review, check out the show notes. You'll get so much more depth on Remi's story. And it's always nice to interact with the podcast. So until next time, bye for now.